I will be very quick because we are a bit late and I cannot make a joke today. It's pity, but I think it's not a good day to make a joke. Just some practical information before we start with the first roundtable. You can chat and ask questions on the app. You can tweet with the hashtag CFD2021, and you can also choose your carbon offsetting for the event on the app, thanks to Climate Seed. And here we are. We can start our first roundtable, moderated by Philippe Taffin. Philippe, can you come on stage, please? And the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Philippe Taffin. I'm currently the Chief Investment Officer of Aviva France and also co-pilot of the Impact Task Force launched by Olivier Grégoire under the Finance for Tomorrow. So thank you to be here and to have waited a little bit for this first roundtable. So of course today it's a great honor and a pleasure to moderate this first roundtable around impact, around the questions how to scale up and measure real impact. So as you all know, impact finance and impact investing has been growing very fast over the last years. According to the GIN figures, it represents more than 500 billion euros today. And more investors show attractive interest to invest in this type of strategies as they think that this approach is really the real one to address the big social and environmental issue we are facing now. Several initiatives have been launched recently, among which the most recent one is the G7 Task Force, and of course, the Finance for Tomorrow Task Force launched a few months ago. Still, this capital only represents less than 0.5% of all this capital over the world. And so the next question is, how can we scale up? How can we improve and attract more capital towards these strategies? What type of frameworks, what tools, what methodology must be put in place in order to measure the impact of these strategies? And so in order to address and to discuss all these topics, let me introduce the outstanding speakers of this roundtable. First of all, Paulina Murphy. Pauline, come on stage, please. Paulina is the Engagement Director at the World Benchmarking Alliance. She leads the World Benchmarking Alliance advocacy, engagement policy, and regulatory outreach, ensuring benchmark reflects societal expectations and are relevant to the external environment they seek to change. Maha Keraman, please. Maha is the head of Positive Impact Business Accelerator at BNP Paribas. She has been very much involved in designing and structuring social impact bonds in France and outside France, in Belgium and in the US. In 2020, Maha launched with the European Investment Fund a dedicated fund to invest in impact bonds in Europe and contribute to scale the products. She also coordinates the impact investing strategy and implementation within the BNP Paribas group. Florent Le5. Florent joined this field in 2013 as Chief Investment Officer of this public bank in charge of the financing of the French local public sector. He's also a member of the supervisory board of the CAFIL, which is the field subsidiary and issuing entity. Nicolas Hazard, French entrepreneur who founded INCO, a global organization with a mission to build a new economy, environmentally sustainable and socially responsible. He's also the founder of the Impact Square event, winner of the Montgolfier Prize, and was elected a Young Global Leader in 2015 by the World Economic Forum. Since 2020, he acts as special advisor in charge of social and solidarity economy to the European Commission. So, very happy to be with you. Let me start with you, Nicolas. My first question is for you. What is your vision of the development of impact financing in Europe? And can you also tell a little bit more about the key obstacles you are facing for developing this type of strategy?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Philippe. Actually, it's pretty emotional to be here with you today, because I remember 10 years ago when I founded INCO the first time, and I developed one of the first impact investing fund in Europe. I was here at the Palais Brongniart meeting with lots of people of the financial world, the Euronext, and all these people. And I was talking about what impact is. And at that time, impact was not something that was on the agenda and was not something that was the priority for the future. And 10 years after, I'm so glad, because I haven't been here for almost 10 years, to see that there's impact everywhere, and this day is the impact day. So I'm pretty happy, first of all, to see this journey that has been amazing in this impact world for the last 10 years, where we came from a topic that wasn't really something in the middle of the conversation, and now really we're talking about it. There are ministers, there are lots of people, there are like the public sector, the private sector, social entrepreneurs, they're all developing and they're all growing, so I'm super happy about that. But now we have some challenges, because the future, there are lots of big issues that we need to tackle: environmental issues, social issues, inequalities, global warming, and all these kind of things. Demographic issues, and we need more than ever social entrepreneurs and impact companies to grow and to develop, to answer these big challenges that we're facing for the next decade. And for that, I'm pretty happy to see that we are already growing, but I think we could do far more. We're only at the beginning of this journey, and there are a lot of things that need to be done to see this market grow, to see this new asset class grow, and I'm talking about impact investing and not SRI. And yes, there are some challenges. The first challenge, and we saw that this morning, first of all, we saw that this morning while we were blocked by people that really, of course, care about the planet and about the environment. And it's important, because I think what we need to do is we're giving a hope in using finance to be one of the solutions to these big challenges, that we're going to face. And I think that there are stuff that are going the right direction, but there are also a lot of bullshit in this sector and in this industry, and we need to address that in measuring the impact, and I think we're going to talk about that later on. But I think it's also key to show that there are some players that are really pure players in this field, that really want to change the world, that really want to do, and others sometimes that are better in marketing than in really doing stuff. And so walking the talk, I think it's very important, because there are lots of people that really count on this sector and on this industry to be changing. And we need to be a right solution, to build together the good solution and to show that they're not wrong and there's a solution. And I think that globally, having a saving account, being able to play a role in the finance sector is more efficient than your ballot when you're voting, actually. Through the money that you have, through your saving accounts, through the money that you invest, you can change the world and you can do things in a far better way, and it's even more efficient sometimes than a democratic system where you have the impression that you can vote for any of the candidates, it won't change anything. So that's really important. There's a big hope for impact investing, for this sector to grow, and we need to prove every day that people are right to invest in our product, and through the product that we're developing, we're really changing things, and we're building a new economy that is sustainable and inclusive at the same time.
Okay, now I turn to Sarah Lacoche. Are you online, Sarah? Can you hear us? Not yet. Can you make me a sign if Sarah is online? No? Okay. So so while waiting for Sarah, maybe my question for you, Maha, you are in BNP Paribas, where you are one of the most proactive and active in the field of the Contrat Impact Français, so the French social impact bond. This type of investment vehicles has been developing very fast. Can you give us some view about that and the key element, the key driver of the acceleration of this market, and what do you see also, same question than Nicolas, about the key issues which prevent to accelerating a little bit more?
Thank you, Philip. Happy to be here too. Just a quick survey. Who knows what is a social impact bond or contrat impact? Okay, not bad. So I'll just have a quick reminder. Social impact bonds, or contrat impact social in French, is a product actually that enables the private sector to pre-finance some innovation in the social or environmental field that are bared by associations, NGOs, social entrepreneurship, who wants to experiment an innovation but do not have the funds to do so. So there is a private investor that will invest in this program. There will be an independent evaluator who will measure actually all the KPIs that are achieved and that are contractually decided by all stakeholders, and then you will have a public authority who will come and reimburse the investors, and even with a bonus if the performance of impact is achieved and it's better than what was scheduled in the beginning. So it's a win-win instrument where all the interests are aligned. It's also a very nice dialogue between parties that usually maybe don't have the opportunity to speak to each other the same language. And it's also a very interesting tool in order to go over the silos that you might have in social actions. I give you an example. We are working on an impact bond with Fondation d'Auteuil on preventing childhood placement for youngsters. And it is a subject that is multifaceted because it's multidimensional, because there are issues on housing. Sometimes children are placed because their parents do not have a home. So it's a question of housing, it's a question of employment, it's a question to access of rights, and it's a question also of how to create a specific environment to enhance the dialogue between the parents and their children. And this specific place is a place where you have all this in the same and unique. So it's very interesting, so that the beneficiaries, they don't have to go here to have a housing, go there to have an employment, go there to have their access to rights. They all have it in the same place. It's a safe place for them during 1 year, and they have all these social workers working with them so that they can work on a project family. And the final KPI that we are expecting is how to avoid children placement. So this is the unique KPI. It's not about cash flows, it's not about profitability, it's about the impact KPI. So it's a very interesting tool. So this is I think one of the main things that makes it so popular today, because it's one of the few tools that addresses that. It's a tool that is concentrated on impact, it's a tool that is concentrated on innovation. And maybe the hurdles that we have today is that it's a question of pedagogy, because in the mindset it's not yet there. Should it be in the governments that need to have a budget that they foresee pluriannually, so they need to say, okay, I need to book today money that I will have to pay in 5 years. If there's a success. For investors or bankers, it's quite complicated to say, okay, what is my risk today? Because I know how to evaluate a risk on the cash flow, but I don't know how to evaluate a risk on impact, how to get a sense of what is my risk on performance of impact. So this is something also that maybe we will discuss a little bit later. And it's also maybe a lack of framework. Today we did it a little bit experimentally. We revamped the bond vehicle, but we try to make it fit into something. And maybe today what is missing is a global framework so that the tool can scale.
Thank you, Ma, for this very precise experience and example of a French social impact bond. Now, I think that Sarah, you are with us. Thank you. So Sarah, you are the director of the finance department of the Banque des Territoires, and you are also in charge of the sustainability strategy and the extra financial evaluation. So your point of view is very interesting for us. Could you tell us about the different strategy, different axes, different dimension where the Banque des Territoires used to work in order to track public-private capital toward impact projects? We don't hear you.
You're on mute.
Sorry. We do not hear you. I'm really sorry. Okay, sorry. So maybe we'll try to fix this and come back to you, Sarah. Very sorry for that. Florent, in this field, you are also very active in providing financing, especially for greening the economy. Can you present the activity and the objective of this field?
Yeah, thank you, Philippe. I'm happy to be here. Since 2019, SFIL has supported the transition of its clients with two specific programs. For local authorities, we have proposed green loans to finance green investments, and for public hospitals, we have also proposed social loans to finance investments hospitals. To give you a key figure, as of today, our sustainable bond outstanding has reached 4 billion, which is split into 1.3 billion of green bonds and 2.7 billion of social bonds. Our green program includes 5 eligible loans categories. Let me give you a topical example of each. The first category is territorial mobility on soft urban transport. So in this field, we finance, for example, the extension of several tramway lines in municipalities of Saint-Étienne, Nice, or Angers. The second eligible category is energy efficiency of buildings. In this area, we have financed the construction of energy-efficient school buildings in the region Occitanie. The third one concerns renewable energy. And in this sector, we have financed the extension of a geothermal network in Seine-Saint-Denis. The fourth category is a little bit less in the spotlight, but it is a key sector in terms of sustainability. It is water management and sanitation. So in this field, we finance, for instance, a new treatment plant for the municipality of Cannes-sur-Mer. The last category relates to household waste management, and in this field, we finance the upgrading of a recycling center in Oise department, for example. So as you can see, we've got a pretty broad range of eligible investment, and those program has been pretty well received by our clients. And in terms of difficulties, I would mention the reporting requirement by those thematic financing. Local authorities are used to financing their general funding needs with classic loans without any reporting requirement. And shifting to a green loan with a use of proceed approach is something which requires a change of habits. Generally speaking, I think that finding the right balance between the increasing level of details within the reporting and the necessity to keep a product on an offer which is pretty simple and manageable for the client is something which is a very important topic for the full industry.
Thank you. I'll come back to Sarah. Is Sarah... Can we hear Sarah now? Sarah, can you? Yes, I know you hear us, but please. So my question was about all the activities developed by Banque des Territoires in the impact field. So can you give us a flavor of all what you do currently? Well, I must tell the audience that it is not the first time that I have this type of technical issues. So, well, maybe if I can have a sign where Sarah is available. 2 minutes? Okay. So we are looking forward to hearing you, Sarah. It's, the tension is up. Good teasing. Okay, Paulina, I know that, well, you in the World Benchmarking Alliance, you concretely try to find some frameworks. And the objective of the World Benchmarking Alliance is to change the behavior of the big corporate regarding the economic model and the way they impact the future and can also addressing, the SDG for the next decades or 20 years. Can you present that, and can you tell us also about the key difficulties when discussing with this big corporate?
Thank you. I feel Sarah's tension, so I'll try to fill the gap. Thank you for having me here. So who is walking the walk? And how do you know? And as investors in this room, maybe you do know who is doing the right things, which companies are progressive, but the people whose money you manage, do they know what those companies are doing? These are some of the fundamental questions that the World Benchmarking Alliance has been trying to address, to really think about what is impact, and then how do you demonstrate to everybody that impact. And so the WBA, created 3 years ago, has been translating the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement for concrete actions for companies. And we take 2,000 dominant, influential companies around the world. We choose them according to their influence on sustainable outcomes. It can be positive or negative influence, I should say, but it's regardless of geography or group structure, regardless of the ownership model or whether the companies are listed or not listed, but it's about their sustainable outcomes and their impact. And for us, it's about impact of the company on people and the planet. And of course, there's lots of discussions about whether it should be about corporate value creation and about double materiality. These are all the regulatory discussions going on at the moment. But our starting point is the impact of the company on people and the planet. And that's really because the SDGs are our North Star. So we've taken that as our guiding, our guide. And that's how then we look at the companies. We put them in different transformations. We have 7. And we look at how that company is going along that transformation. So it's not just a snapshot of what's happening at the moment, but also where's the ambition of the company. So for the high emitters, the autos or the oil and gas, how they're doing on their road to 1.5 degree scenario. So we look at companies' policies, the commitments, how are they getting there, and then actions and the progress. And that's really moving the dialogue from the commitments. There's been lots and lots of companies making lots of commitments since the SDGs were launched, but there's not so much focus on who's holding them accountable for those commitments and how companies are progressing on that agenda. But I'll give you an example. I'll talk about energy and decarbonisation later. But for now, we've just published a benchmark of 350 food companies on the food and agriculture system. And it looks at the entire value chain. And so agricultural inputs, processors, food retailers, restaurants. And every single one of those companies was looked at through 45 indicators in environmental, social, nutrition, and governance pillars. So we look at the whole of the business. So if a food company is doing well on nutrition, it's also important that we know how they're treating their workers throughout the supply chain. So we try to give that holistic picture. Number one is Unilever, and it got 71%. The French company Danone was ranked number 3 with 63%. And the next French company, Carrefour, was ranked 20 at 43.5%. I'd love to say I'd love to celebrate the leadership. There are some amazing good practices that these companies are doing. But actually, if the leading company is only achieving 71% out of 100, we need to really consider what are the levers, what's the support that that company needs from investors, from finance, from governments, from civil society actors, to make sure that that transition is met by the 2030. I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Sarah, you're back.
Okay.
But with the sound.
Do you hear me?
Ah, fantastic.
With the sound?
Fantastic.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
We have the image
So
and the sound, so you can now, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm happy to be with you, although I would have preferred to be with you for real. I'm going to talk about the Banque des Territoires and the Caisse des Dépôts. So what we do, because we always try to work with public and private actors, because I think it's the way to move now. First of all, I'd like to say that the Banque des Territoires has the impact at the heart of its strategy. And it means that our investment strategy, we're ready to be a long-term investor. It means we're going to be patient, and it means that our motivation is to seek the highest possible extra financial impact on environmental, social, or governance issue, and also impact on the territories, because we want to reduce the inequalities on the territories. It means that we're going to be patient. We know it's gonna mean that we're going to take some risks, because for some of these projects, the business plan is new, and as Maha said just before, you have to try new approaches. So you need innovation. So it means we expect a return on investment, because we are a financial institution, but we place the impact at the heart of the discussion from the beginning. That's very important for us. Focus on some specific areas to finance. We think all sectors are really interesting, and we also think that it doesn't apply to one class of asset. I think everything can be useful, and so it means that we're going to be there from seed capital to capital development. The idea really is to support a project for long term. As Mahat just said before, I think, and I'm going to refer to the principles of finance for tomorrow for the framework. Intentionality is very important from the beginning, because it means that you're going to finance a project and you know what the goal is. You know exactly where they want to go, and you know how they want to go there and what impact they are looking for. For example, we support Alliance for Impact, and I think it's very important because we know from every project, we know what they want to achieve. So that's the principle of intentionality from the start is very important for us, because it's part of the discussion of why we're going to go and support a project. It also means that sometimes we want to focus, for example, our strategy is anchored in the Sustainable Development Goals, and we have key priorities, for example, on climate change or on reducing inequalities. So it means sometimes the discussion with on the investment thesis is going to be, we want to change a little bit. We want to make sure it fits to our strategy. The other principle that is key is additionality. It means you need to be able to dedicate some financing. And for example, on the social economy, we plan to allocate 300 million euros between 2021 and 2025. The other key issue is measurability. I'm going to be able to talk to you later about the tools we've developed. But I think it's key. You need to have from the start, and it's linked to intentionality, key performance indicators. Otherwise, you won't be able to know whether the impact was achieved. So all of these are quite new ways of doing things, but we really believe that it's part of our role as the Banque des Territoires and the Caisse des Dépôts to be there and to have these discussions with public and private actors, and to show that we are there, we're ready to be there for long term, and to be patient.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. You explain us, all the. You embed each time you are looking for an impact investment project. Did you develop some specific operating tools or framework? Because beside the intentionality, the additionality of impact, there is also a key element, which is a measurement. What is the social environmental return of the project you finance? Could you tell us the specific maybe framework or tools you put in place in order to make the process robust?
As I said, impact is at the heart of a strategy. So we have some sort of scoring tools that we've developed in 2019 and 2020 on the whole investment portfolio on new flows. What we try to do is at the beginning, when we see the project, we try to assess the positive and negative impact on the social, environmental, and governance issues, and we try to measure them. So it means that we have developed a set of indicators that we try to assess. There's a quantitative analysis and qualitative analysis. Of course, we finance very different sectors. So we have some, I would say, mainstream indicators, for example, the tons of emissions avoided or the impact on employment. But we have some specific indicators as well. For example, when we talk about renewable energies, we can try to measure the wind energy capacity that will be generated by the investment. So now we've done that for the past year, a little bit more on all new flows. These have helped us to try to set targets. We have our medium-term financing plans that's anchored with our strategy, and now we try to put some targets, medium-term targets, and we try to set an annual path. That's part of the medium-term plan of the Caisse des Dépôts and of the Banque des Territoires. I can give you an example. We try to set some targets on social housing thermic renovation by 2024. Our target is to finance 200,000 renovation, and we try to put that into the context of the low carbon national strategy need. So we try to see how much we're going to be able to help, and in this area it might be around 1/3 of the need. We do that on some other issues. So that's very important for us because it's also a discussion with our governance to see what is our ambition, and that's we try to do that. We also do some other things. Is that we also do some evaluation. For example, we try to do ex ante, in itinerary, and ex post evaluation. Very recently, we have done an evaluation on our environmental loans, the one for renovating social housing, because it had been the product has been on the market for the past 10 years. So we were able to have a qualitative and quantitative evaluation to say, okay, what has been the impact of these products, and we've decided to make it public. We decided at the Banque des Territoires that it's part of transparency. It refers back to measuring the impact and be transparent about it. You can find the synthesis of this evaluation online. Other things is that we also, that the Caisse des Dépôts is issuing some bonds. In May 2021, we've issued our third sustainable bond for 500 million euros for the 5 years. And we have a very specific annual report. You can really see all the projects that have behind this bond. You can see them on the map. You can see the description. You can see what were the targets, what's the impact. And for example, if we had some ambition on the labels for buildings, you see exactly what the labels are. So these are the whole set of things that we've developed. Of course, there are still areas of improvement, and we're still working on how to improve those things because, for example, what I just told you is that we've been doing this scoring method on the new flows. Now the issue is how do we do to analyze the whole portfolio? It's another thing, because some of the investments are, you know, long time investment for us. We also want to use the dialogue with our counterparts. So we're going to issue a questionnaire on environmental, social, and governance issue with our counterparts to know what's going on, how are they doing on the project compared to the ambition we had together. And also, I think one other area of progress is how to assess negative externalities, because it's sometimes more difficult to assess that. But I think if you want to be transparent, you need to have the very comprehensive approach and comprehensive analysis. And also, one issue I think we need to put really on the forefront now is biodiversity. It's not always easy, and it's not just on biodiversity projects, but on all projects you can see that there are usually biodiversity issues.
Thanks, Sarah. Maybe, Maha, maybe you can give us also just elaborating on what Sarah said about the measurement, about the social impact contract, because it's really, measurement is really at the core, I would say, of the structuring and the designing of the product. So maybe it would be interesting that you tell us about how you operationally are doing that.
Yes, sure. Indeed, in social impact contracts, impact is not a nice to have, it is a must have. Why? Because all the financial mechanics are indexed on the impact. It is the way that the social operator will measure its will take the risk on its reputation to be able to give the program. It's the risk on the investor, who will only know how much he will get back from his capital and maybe from his interest. That is indexed on impact. So it's really, and also for the public authorities, because what is core in the social impact contract is that you measure the cost avoided for the society. When you put someone in employment, whereas he was unemployed, you make some savings for the society. It's like around 15,000 euros per person per year. When you avoid children placements on the program that I was telling before, you avoid like 60,000 euros per children per year. So there is a notion when you do preventing through a social impact contract, it is less costly globally for the society than when you do when you try to cure the problem after it occurs. And of course it's better also in terms of beneficiaries for their impact. So it is core, and there are some issues which we face for all impact measurement. It is, do we need to standardize versus do we need to do tailor-made? Do we need to have a simplicity versus professionalism and complexity? So those are issues that we face in social impact contracts, but I think it's something that we face for all impact measurement methodologies. How do we try to do it? By asking a few questions when we see a contract. What is the reference value you want to measure against? What is your benchmark? Do you have references? Do you have historical data? Do you have statistical data that are available? How can you try to get those statistical data talking for a program? How do you benchmark your KPIs? And if you don't have that, how do you build actually your KPIs? For example, there is one social impact contract that is just been signed today with Médecins du Monde. And they really go to the randomized control trial. You know what that is? It means that you have actually, the program is given to a certain number of beneficiaries, and you have a control group who doesn't have the program and who matches exactly the specifics of the population, and you measure the progression of both groups, one who has the program and one who doesn't, and you hope that the one who gets the program has much better results in terms of impact than the ones who don't. So this is a way we can measure. On ADI, for example, we didn't have any statistical data, so we tried to measure the length of the employment that is given through the program, meaning that if we think that the program is sustainable, we will measure how many people have actually still a job that were unemployed before the program, who still have a job at least 2 years after the program. So it means that we are achieving a very sustainable impact within the length. The length is very important in measurement. And so I think that we need today the social impact contract is interesting because it's also an experimentation of all evaluation tools. So we try to experiment at each contract, and maybe we will get some ideas to get further on. And just because there are so many impact methodologies that I think that there are people, so we need to make up our minds and try maybe to start small, but all together, and try to have something that is robust, but still, you know, experimentation going forward, and try to get it better as we go forward, and not try to have the perfect tool from the beginning, because I think we'll still be there in like 100 years.
Thanks, Mark. It's quite fascinating, and you just show us that measuring the net impact is not an easy task. It requires a lot of resources, a very strict and robust process, so thank you. You also told about the necessity of some standard or in terms of maybe metrics or in terms of framework. I would like to ask Nicolas about that. Do you agree on the necessity maybe to have more common standards, especially at the European level, like we have, for instance, on the green taxonomy? There are also some discussion around the launch of a social taxonomy. I assume it would be maybe more difficult to put in place. What's your view about that? Do you agree on the necessity to put all this process and to put in place more standard for impact in order to scale up?
Sure, I think it's really fundamental to measure the impact. That's how we're going to make this industry grow, and it's really, really key. Just maybe a few words, not to create any confusion, about what's the difference between SRI and impact investing, because maybe it's not really clear, like through the different conversation that we're having and that we had. SRI and ESG criteria are not the same than impact investing and investing in social and environmental startups. It's two different things. SRI is about investing in companies. Maybe I'm going to be a bit, harsh, but SRI is investing through criteria in companies that their main goal is to make profit, but at the same time, they would like to contribute to the millennial goals, and they would like to have an impact. But their main goal is to make profit. So when you do an investment, you invest in companies that make the world less worse, I would say. While investing in impact companies, in impact investing, is investing in companies that their main criteria is not only to make profit. It's of course to have an economic model that is sustainable, but at the same time they try to tackle the major social and environmental issues that we're facing right now. So these organizations are organizations that try to make the world better. So that's a big difference. So you have SRI and ESG, and I think it's really great, and it's developing, and Europe is pretty leading in this sector, and it's good because it's going the right direction. But what we try to achieve through impact investing is to go further and invent some economic models that really are able to tackle the major issues that we're facing, and that are solutions to the big problems that we have. And the first big problem, I mean, we have different, but like that, let's say 3 big problems. The first one is environment, of course. The second one is social inequalities that are growing in lots of countries. And the third one is a demographic kind of issue, meaning that we're 7 billion right now and we're going to be 10 billion in the next 25 years. So we need to address that as well. So at the European level, of course, we're thinking, and there are lots of people, the European Commission is thinking on and is pushing hard on the environmental side and on the green taxonomy, because it's also, and we've heard that through the French minister this morning, that say that, of course, there are some exemptions that can be made while it's environment, and because, like, it's a pressing and it's a big issue right now, and we need to find solution, and the financial markets and the financial world needs to address that as well, and need to take its part for tackling that. So for that, there are lots of things that are going on, and I think that at the European level, it's pretty impressive how also through the different funds that they're launching, they really want to go to this direction. So that's good. But then there's the social part. And of course, and you said it's real. So there's a discussion at the European level on how you can implement and develop more social economy, and also to create maybe a social taxonomy for that. And that's key. Why? Because sustainability, when we're all talking about sustainability has two legs. It's the environmental one, but it's also the social one. You won't be able to tackle environmental issues if you're not working on inequalities, and it's the same on the other way. Because lots of the people that are struggling right now and that are facing poverty are people that also have facing directly also the environmental changes that we're seeing right now. So we're working on that, but it's complicated. Why is it complicated? Because at the European level and all the different states and the member states of the European Union, in the core of the philosophy of Europe and the European Union, I mean, the social part is not a big part, unfortunately. And we also need to reframe that, and I think to work on that, to make the social agenda on top of the global European agenda. So of course now green taxonomy is growing more and more, and there are some solutions. We're working on some social one, but for that you need to have unanimously the 27 countries that agree on the fact that it's important also to work socially. And Europe is based on competition. That's the core value of the European construction. And the social part is not the main priority right now. So I think we need to rebuild also the European project more globally, to rethink it, because there are things that the world is changing a lot, so the European Union as an institution also needs to change, and the social part needs to be in the center of the conversation, as we've achieved and we've made it through the last 5 to 10 years on the environmental side. We're working on it, but we need to be a majority to be able to really make it happen.
Paulina, you already described, what you're doing at the World Benchmarking Alliance, that you have already ranked companies, corporate in different sectors. Could you give us some example in terms of metrics or frameworks, or difficulty maybe when discussing with the international corporate to align everybody on the same standards, and maybe a word on the collaboration partnership you have with ADEME, especially regarding the methodology of evaluating the climate impact on the companies?
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, we've been really privileged to take a best-in-class framework, the ACT framework, and to work with the DEM, so thank you very much. It's a rigorous assessment of companies on their energy and decarbonisation transition. And it's ambitious, so it's not easy. But it's also looks at if we, and I really like what was just said about the difficulty of agreeing on the social issues, and I'll talk a bit about the just transition as well. But it's really, if we look at governments are not going to move very fast. There are lots of negotiations to try to agree some level of baseline internationally. But so we do need to rely on voluntary change to go to a 1.5 degree scenario, and for that we've been working with the DEM. And it's looking at the willingness and the ability, both from a qualitative and a quantitative perspective, of companies, the most carbon-intensive economic sectors. So we look at their companies' climate strategies, their business model, their investments, their operations, and then their GHG emissions management. And if, as financiers, as investors, if these are the topics that you can pick up with the companies that you're investing in and thinking about the transition that they are going to, then that's our invitation really to look at the methodology, that framework. It's a toolkit for you when you have the dialogue with these carbon intense sectors. And just to give you, and I also get lots of questions about, okay, but that's another framework, there's lots of reporting, which framework should we use? There's just lots of initiatives. So we're really aware of that, and working with the DEM, using ACT, that's already taking a best-in-class framework. But then we also look at GRI standards and IIRC reporting framework. We look at SASB standards. We look at ARISTA 3.0 and the GHG protocol principles. We build on the CDP disclosure principles. And finally, we're also trying to look at convergence with TCFD, because we really understand that there's lots of frameworks. So how can we ask companies not 101 questions, but the critical ones? So that's really kind of giving a picture of how we try to do it in practice. The results of that, and I'll give you a quick snapshot, we ranked 100 companies in the oil and gas sector, and it was the first time that we've used the 1.5 scenario, the IEA's net zero by 2050 scenario. So it's harsh, and it looks at scopes 1, 2, and 3. And the top company got 57%, it's Neste. And the second came at 56%, and the third 44%. So these are quite low scores, so we've got a lot to do. So again, my invitation and my plea really is for you as finance, use your leverage with these companies and look at those pillars that I noted. And then I don't know if I'll have time at the end, so I'm going to quickly go to it now. But the just transition.
Very quick.
So we use the ACT framework to look at the decarbonisation transition, but we need to then put the social lens on top of it, and that's the just transition. And their governments are as behind, we're all struggling to understand what does that mean. So we need to radically collaborate together.
Thank you, Paulina. Florent, we are running out of time, so I'm sorry, we have 5 minutes left. So maybe you can give us your view about, very quickly about metrics, and much above that, what are the main change you're calling for in order to do much more now in terms of scaling up? What's your proposal for accelerating? In a very, very short.
Yes. Okay, so in France, local authorities represent 2/3 of the public investment, and we think that the transition will require a significant increase in those public investments. So in order to fully comply with the national low carbon strategy, we estimate that, for instance, local authorities should invest an additional amount of 15 billion per year. It's an increase by 30%, which is very significant. In comparison with this highly ambitious long-term potential, the current production of green loans appears to be still pretty modest. Since the launch of a green program, the green production has represented 10% of local authorities' investment. So we think that there is definitely a room for improvement. Today, the limitation factor is not on the funding side. We could issue much more green bonds. For instance, our last green issuance received a demand 5 times as high as the amount issued. But the main limitation factor is currently the lack of green projects. So in order to boost the green and sustainable investment of local authorities, we will work on several axes. First, we made the decision to intensify the dialogue with our clients on the existing green framework. We need to convince them that it is in their interest to invest as early as possible to adapt to climate change transition. Then we also think about the possibility to complement our offer of thematic financing by launching a new program of social loans for local authorities in 2022. The idea is to finance the social investments, for example, in the field of education or culture. French local authorities will play a major role in the transition to a more sustainable future. Last year, we committed to financing 1 billion of green loans to local authorities and 1 billion of social loans to public hospitals each year, and we strongly reaffirm this commitment. SFIL is ready to increase its capacity in the green and social bond markets to make sure that long-dated financing at competitive conditions are available for sustainable investments.
Thank you, Florence. Sarah, I give you the floor. What are in 1 minute, I know it's quite challenging, what would be the key drivers of change? What do you propose or recommend in order to accelerate?
First of all, in our case, we are ready to mobilize quite a substantial amount of financing. We've announced last year the climate plan of 40 billion with PPE for climate to finance transition, renewable energies and modernization. But also it means that we need to finance new types of contracts for the impact contract, the impact funds. It's new, but we've been engaged since the launch of this new financing products as far as we are concerned. It means having a different analysis of risk and being able to take those risks. But as I said before, I think it's necessary. And I hope that the fact that we are present and committed shows that other investors can also come and join the game. I also share what just been said. Sometimes there is some financing, but our clients or counterparts, they need some time to build a strategy, because sometimes we have the financing and the projects are not there. So we also have the same issue of talking to our clients, our counterparts, to local authorities to see what do you need, and sometimes they need some advice and they need to share experience and they need to see what others have done, and that's very important for us to do that. And I think everybody has a role to play with that, to share what are the best practices, what has been working, not working, and then we're here to say, okay, we're here to finance your projects.
Same question for you.
Yes. Maybe I'll just take what we're doing in works in the G7 Impact Task Force currently, and there are 3 main factors that were identified, which is impact integrity. So integrity passes through maybe better accounting services, because today what made the world work from the financial point of view is accounting, regulation and everything, and today for impact we do not have that. So maybe I can state a very interesting initiative which is called Impact Weighted Assets, that is currently being put forward by the Harvard University to try to translate what was done from a risk and accounting perspective to what can be done towards impact for more integrity. There is harmonization, so can we have a common baseline to work all together? Because if it's not harmonized, we cannot speak the same language, and for that maybe the regulator can have a nice place. I know it's too much regulation is not so good, but through regulation, we still try to achieve things, and at least we have the same standards, which is set for everyone, and then we build on from that. It's getting better and everything, but then the regulation should work, of course, with practitioners so that it's operable. We also need data. This is very important in the impact field. And everything around regulation, because today the regulation is not adapted to impact. I would maybe give 2 examples. Simple, normal people cannot invest in impact because it's supposed to be too risky unless they have a specific funds. All the financing that are long-term are very much penalized by the regulations, and whereas the long term should be the one that is patient and more impactful, and investing in startup, it's still considered too risky too. So there is not yet a good communication between the regulators and the practitioners.
Thanks, Mara. Paulina, what would be your key recommendations?
So We've been working with a few investors already on the just transition as part here with Finance for Tomorrow, and it's incredibly helpful for us to understand where that dialogue is going. So my request is what I said before, for investors to continue to form alliances with the rest of society, whether it's labor unions, business platforms, civil society organizations, governments, and then vice versa. They need to learn, we need to learn how to work better with you.
Nicolas?
I think like everything needs to be changed. The whole philosophy about investing, about what's the creating value and so on, the mindset, the total mindset of the finance world, but also of the global economy needs to be changed, because otherwise I think we're going to really struggle. So I would start with something that actually for me is really important. We had like the privilege to have the French minister this morning with us. I would like, for me, the tax issue is absolutely key, and I would change it drastically in making a different tax level depending on the impact that you have. For me, all the companies are paying a 25% of tax, whether they're impactful or not impactful or so on. I would differentiate that and really work on how to measure, and also at the public level to give tax cuts to the companies that really have a strong impact, to change the taxonomy on the companies that the ones that have good impact shouldn't pay the same amount. They should pay, I don't know, 5%, and maybe the ones that have a worse impact should pay 30 or 35%, and work on something like that, because we need to have a big shift in the way we see how we create value, how we tax that, and where people want to invest. And if we had, because when you're an impact fund, you have the same tax cuts than other funds that are not impact investing funds. So there are no specificities for doing that, and I don't think it's normal. I think we should, as a global community and a global society, rethink about our system, and taxation is absolutely key for that for me.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you all here, and thank you, Sarah, for your views. We could have spent more time together. Also, thank you for all the strong messages given to the audience and the public in order to scale up and to accelerate regarding impact strategy, impact financing. Maybe there is a key message I have in mind. It's about the way that we speak the same language. All of you have stressed that it is important that the notion of the definition of impact be shared together, so that we can accelerate and base and on this solid foundation. And I just wanted to re-express the fact that the French Impact Task Force, led by Finance for Tomorrow, as you all know, has published a common definition of the impact financing. And now we are in the moment when we want this definition to live, to develop, to gain momentum. And so I call all the players, the actors, asset manager, entrepreneur, to join this definition, to sign the pledge which will support this definition. So please. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe. Thank you, all the speakers. We show that finance can have an impact, and we have the tools for that. It's time for lunch break. Thank you for being so attentive during this morning, quite surprising. A few logistic points for the afternoon and the parallel session that will take place in three different rooms.
Merci.
Let's meet again.
Merci beaucoup à toute l'équipe. Au revoir.
Au revoir, Sarah. Sorry. Let's come back at 2 o'clock for the parallel sessions. The first one, just transition.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this riveting session on sustainable finance for citizens. So don't be impressed by the fact that all chairs are not occupied, because actually a lot of people are following us online. So I am certain that we have a huge attendance. So, sustainable finance for citizens. This is a major topic. I guess this is not something that we really talk about. That's not really one of the focuses of sustainable finance in general. So, to address this question, we have a remarkable roster of participants. Delphine Damarzit, first of all, who is the chairwoman and CEO of Euronext France. Thibaut Girardi, he's the managing director of 2 Degrees Investing Initiative, France. We have Victor Van Hoorn, who's the executive director of Eurosif. I think by now you all know Eurosif, which is the Federal Trade Association federating various bodies, including the French body in this field. And finally, Eva Sadoun, who co-founded the LITA platform. This is private investment. Well, this is an investment vehicle to invest in socially responsible corporations, and this is one of the success stories of alternative finance over the last few years. So, thank you for being here with us for this session. So, to kick things off, I would like to turn to Delphine to address a question that, well, before that, I wanted to talk about regulation. If we have to talk about regulation, we push it till the very end, because I would like to turn things on their head and to end with regulation and start addressing what's going on at the moment on the market. What are the initiatives that are sort of moving the picture forward? So I would like to ask Delphine how she considers this newfound interest of people for the stock exchange, and in the world, I would say, and in Europe. And what do you think Euronext can do to sort of direct this appetite towards sustainable investment? Thank you, Pierre. I'm pleased to be with you today. Well, we're seeing change. We've been seeing change over the last 12 months or so, especially in France, which probably was not the country where you had the highest number of direct individual investors investing on the stock exchange. Just to give you a few figures about, the whole of Euronext, historically speaking, without Italy, which is a very retail-oriented market. So we are quite envious of that. But I would say that we've seen a return of individual investors, accounting for 700 million euros per day of trade traded by individuals. That's plus 80% compared to 2018. And for France, that's 342 million euros a day. So that's almost half, which actually is accounts for actually a 100% increase over the last year. And now the less than 35 years of age represent 18% of investors, and when they used to make up 11%. Historically, we had sort of this generation, this older generation of investors that was occupying most of the landscape, and now it's changing. And there is a new generation of intermediaries, of brokers, basically online brokers, who are attracting a new kind of clientele. Obviously, this brings technical problems in terms of execution, but I'll come back to that. So that's good news, obviously. Independently from, I was going to say, but actually it's connected, independently from investment education. And so there's a return of individual investors. Then in terms of orientation, people have to make their own choices. Obviously, what we can do is ensure that on our markets, we will provide them with products that they want to invest in. They have this appetite for sustainable investment. So with us, they must find products that are both, in line with what they want and that are credible in terms of their sort of financial construction. This is why we have indices and derivatives that are either accessible directly by individual investors or that are made available after being sort of packaged by us through their banks, through the banking networks. So this is the case for ETFs, which are based on indices that we've built ourselves, or structured products, which are provided by banking networks, or banks, or more generic indices, such as the one that we created with CAC 40 ESG, which you will be able to invest as well. So are they successful, these indices? So the electronic transfer funds, ETFs, and the ESG ETFs have seen a rise of volume traded by individual investors by 27% this year. So that's a real trend right there. And like all players, since all players are going for the ESG, we are seeing things happening. The CAC 40 ESG index, we built it at the request of our clients. Why? Because beyond the indices that we had created, they wanted the historical indices to be sort of broken down into ESG focus indexes. Amundi in June announced that they had bought the ESG license, and BNP announced in September that they would shift their CAC 40 ETFs towards CAC 40 ESG, meaning that assets under management or savings under management was sort of migrated towards the new index. So that's something that is going to create a new sort of foundation, to create a new normal, which is really a basic fundamental movement towards ESG. So ESG is going to become the norm. And this is driven by individual demands and by also the commitment on the part of brokers. I don't think brokers would do it against the wish of their clients, obviously, but this also has to do with the will of individual investors and management companies. They're shifting towards more assets under management that are labeled, if you will, ESG. But this has to be credible from a financial standpoint, obviously. Victor, Eurosif, regarding sustainable and green finance, usually it's rather institutional investors who invest in that. Maybe I'm wrong, but how do you see this movement from institutional investors, which has really changed the face of financial markets over the last few years? So how do you see this shift from them to individual investors? Thank you for this question, and thank you for inviting us to be part of this panel. I think when you're trying to assess the European situation, you see that across many markets, the people want to hear more about sustainability and green finance, and they want to use their money to this end. But, and I think this underlines what's being said, there's a lack of access, there's a dearth, if you will, of products that can fill this gap, if you will. So this is just, this is but the beginning. And questions of, sustainability, climate change, biodiversity, climate protection, these are very complex issues to wrap your head around as an investor, but also complex for brokers, for, financial advisors. How do you market such products? So you said that we had to talk about regulation at the very end, but if I could just say a few words about it, clearly what EU regulators had in mind was to set up a normative framework to find a solution to this, but we're seeing that in its implementation, we're seeing, and not just in France, across Europe, across European markets, there is a gap, a knowledge gap with investors, but also with brokers. We don't know enough to really support investors in their investments. Thank you, Thibault. I think 2 Degrees, your initiative, issued a very thorough a survey on the demand side of German investors and French investors, as well as an analysis of where they invest. Thank you for inviting me today. So, 2DI, 2 Degrees Investing Initiative. I mean, we've been putting out surveys, focus group results, etc., in France and Germany and the rest of Europe. Why? Because we want to understand what savers, what investors expect in terms of extra financial notions. So I'll try to share with you the main findings. First of all, it's quite basic, but the overwhelming majority, actually more than 70% of investors, say that they want to invest in sustainable financial products, which is, good news. So you can invest sustainably. Out of the 70% of respondents, they say that some of them say that they are convinced that this will mean high yield. Another part, in the 70%, say that they want to invest sustainably because it's in line with their values. They bike to work, so they don't want to finance oil and gas, basically. And we have one last part, about 30% of our respondents who want to invest to have an impact on the world or in the actual economy, meaning that if I put €1, if I invest €1 in this product, I know that it will generate such and such change in the real world, if you will, in the real economy. So it brings questions of causation, of the link between investment and what a company does with the money. But it does go to show that there are people out there who are looking to really change the world as it is. So let's take a look at those investors. The positive thing about it is that if they can really access investment products that are impactful, they can really be a player in the energy transition, in a fair, just transition, thanks to their money. The thing is, they need two things for that. First of all, they need to understand what are the products that will fit their needs and their expectations. And at the moment, when you invest money in financial products, it gives you access to various risk and yield profiles, but not impact profiles. So this is just a side note, but if I may mention an initiative that we are involved in with Finance for Tomorrow, its purpose is to develop a list of criteria that allow you to basically grade an impact, to give you an impact grade. So that way we can provide investors with these criteria, and that way they know that they can orient their investment. They will know that they might have a lower yield, but they will have a higher impact on what the company will do with the money. So second of all, do they have easy access to these products? What we're seeing is that people think that the products that are most impactful are private equity or crowdfunding, but actually these are not mainstream products, and these are not products that are easily accessible for everyone. So I think there needs to be a huge change in the financial industry. I think the regulators definitely have a role to play if we want to encourage these investors to invest, if they want to be more impactful, if they want to be able to invest in products that meet their expectations. I will conclude on this. I've focused on the 30%, but 100% of those 30% would have to really refocus or shift their investments if we wanted to invest all the money that we need towards energy transition. But that's not likely so far. So one of our findings is that all investors who want to invest sustainably indirectly should be able to have impact, even though it's not as important to them as yield, for instance. So thank you. So that's actually what LITA does best, investing, directing individual investors towards so-called impact companies. And why do we do this? Because unfortunately, the conclusion that we draw already 7 years ago is that sustainable investment, as it was structured, did not produce any impact, or else we would have, been content with reorganizing new products, and that would have, been enough. But actually, I worked in a large bank in the past. We started structuring sustainable products but we had to exclude certain values, certain shares, in order to basically align ourselves with the values of our investors. But the problem is that it didn't have any impact, real impact on the real economy, because there were other investors who were going to take an interest in it. And then we saw other products being developed, such as sustainable development, savings accounts, or other thematic green products. But again, we could not quite distinguish what was green from what was not green. It was actually compromising the whole dynamic, the whole momentum, because individual investors were faced with products that they did not expect. They thought that they would be, they were getting the green offer when they were not. So we've implemented sector-specific policies in the bank that I was working with. And so how can we do to redirect savings toward the real economy, and how can we bring about this to the benefit of our fellow citizens? So back then we were our founders. We were 23 years of age. It was 8 years ago, but basically we thought of it as we had this sort of youthful energy, and we thought, well, the simplest thing to do is to invest directly in the companies which produce, affordable housing, solar panels, etc. But actually, these companies are exactly the ones that are considered the riskiest. These are the ones that we can advertise the least. There are lots of constraints, but actually, if you take a look at our portfolio over the last 6 years, out of the 160 companies that we've financed, we had 4 default regarding venture capital investments. So 4 defaults out of the 160 companies that we funded. So I looked at your website this morning, and one of the categories that you offer is startup companies. Yes, and the rest is bonds or loans in order to relocate the textile industry to France, or how to invest in organic agriculture, for instance, with almonds, and basically when you invest €1 in those funds, in those products, you have 90 cents who go to the real economy. So then we thought, if we want to really be able to provide good products, we need to take an interest in the listed products as well.
So some of the original questions: how can we make sure that the money that's in these daily financial products, how can we make sure that they have actual impacts? So looking at perhaps our own life insurance, and as we looked at the market and the composition of the Euro funds, which there's some 80% there. Looking at the units, we weren't able to structure a product that had impact. So it's just beyond our possibility to structure products with ETFs and an average in the medium term, where we didn't necessarily know if the money would be invested in the real economy. It was just a matter of selecting that would be sustainable, and we weren't able to find the products. So our goal there was to put some transparency back into that, and maybe that's our role, not structuring products, but establishing transparency in the markets. So over the past 2 years, we've been working, and with 2 Degrees Investing and Carbon 4 and other stakeholders, so working on a database that we're trying to structure over the past 2 years. Is that the RIFT project? I'm getting there. Hold on. This is my storytelling. Don't cut me off here. So it is a database that analyzes all of the Euro funds
Native account.
and all of these units of accounts. And so we get enough information there on the Euro funds, and that was impossible in the past, to assess. Obviously, we've got 80% coverage rate and the impact on biodiversity, carbon, and other products. So pretty much all of the investment products, the savings products of the French. So in addition to that, you have a critical analysis of in addition to your offering, you have it's a mobile app called Rift. You're right. Here we are. And so today it's available in your app store, and it's gotten improved over the past couple of days. We went from 40 to 80% coverage just day before yesterday, so it's even better. So you can put your life insurance in there, your livret A, and it gives you your allocation in terms of the sector of activity, the business sector, and sometimes it gives you the top 10 of the companies, but we can't always communicate that. So what we do is you take that data, analyze all of the biodiversity, carbon, temperature with 2 degrees whenever possible, because we can only work together on certain products, not all of them. So we supply that data to private individuals, and we add a questionnaire to that orientates private individuals to these products that have real impact. So the questionnaire is in line with MiFID II, and it's also plugged into the banking institutions to, as it were, sort of be the gendarmes or to police the impact and to provide this information to private individuals, be sort of the watchdog, as it were. So Rift is already out there working. It is. Since about the past 4 months, it's been available on the App Store, and we've been building the database for the past 3 years. Thibault, I heard about my Fermanec project, and how does that fit together with Rift? I'm going to try and not repeat what Eva just said. My Family Rix is a complementary, and its common goal is to provide information to investors, the information they need to allocate their investment where it best meets their needs. So Rift, My Fair Money, was launched in Germany about a year ago. We were talking about, we were in discussions with Lita, and as Eva was saying, part of the information we use is also shared and used by Rift, and the goal was to replicate these platforms. And for My Fair Money, we were it's not an internet platform, but we wanted to roll that out in France between now and the end of this month, and across Europe between now and next year. We want to optimize the synergy across the apps like Rift in various countries. Keeping in mind that everything we produce is free access, open source at 2DI. So the goal is to create, be able to enable financial advisors to take ownership of the platform and use that in their information systems and use that to better advise their clientele. So it's financed by European money, right? That's right. The first version was funded by the German government, and in France it's through green funding. Now, what is the most outstanding in our platform? Well, like all of our work, it's based on sources. We do these surveys every 2 years, so the bilateral, the focus groups, and the surveys and the studies enable us to figure out how to ask the right questions to investors to help them best understand what their specific needs are. It sounds simplistic when I say that, but if you ask the same question in different ways to different people at 3 different times of the day, you're going to get 3 different answers. So the way the questions are asked in these questionnaires is really important. So the first module in our platform is a questionnaire to better understand what your extra financial expectations and needs are. So we have access to a profile for a responsible investment, and based on your answers, what you're looking for is probably being, say, overexposed to, say, green activities, not being exposed to certain activities, or to put your money in products that really have impact. So it comes back to that question earlier: how can you access the project? Well, and in addition to that module, we have another one that's very simple, very similar to Rift. It's a database that compiles, in France, there are about 3,000 different funds available to retail investors. Across Europe, it's about 10,000. And so the database communicates extra financial information on the products. So we have the business areas where the product is exposed, but they also mention the controversial investments. We have companies that perhaps are negatively exposed, or they're perhaps impacting animals or child labor. And so we expose controversial companies as well. We have a climate score that's part of our charter. The methodology is called Pact. I'm working on that for about 10 years. It's used by thousands of financial institutions across the world. This score enables you to understand to what extent the product is aligned with the 2-degree trajectory or not. I'm going to be transparent. Right now, we don't have a global impact indicator yet to qualify the financial product's impact. We can qualify the underlying companies, but it enables you to invest in a way that's consistent with your values. So we can determine the impact, and there's the educational content as well. There are videos, articles that are a part of all of our studies that we carry out every year. And the studies enable us, the questionnaires and surveys enable us to understand the understanding of what the barriers are to socially responsible investment for investors. So we're trying to explain the concepts that they don't understand, because impact in and of itself is a concept that investors have a hard time getting their heads around. So we have videos and tutorials that explain all of that. So this educational aspect is really interesting. It's indispensable. Now, Delphine, how can stock exchanges contribute to this? How would you react to these private initiatives that sort of renew the relationship with investors to clarify things? And how can you contribute to that? Even beyond your product of your indices. Well, we're not distributors. We're not retailers. We have a relationship that we offer the platform, and people operate on it in a way. It's indirect as well. So just by placing orders, right? So that's important. So the first thing that we need to do is ensure the best ethics on our platform. Good execution conditions, good governance, the proper governance, and making sure that the people and the products that are listed on our stock exchange, they have to meet compliance conditions and everything regarding money laundering as well, and good governance. So that's the first, I would say, promise that if a listed company has to be transparent, because they are addressing a general public and don't have a one-to-one relationship with a shareholder, for instance, someone who's unknown. No, that's not the case. So they make commitments, and these commitments are verified by the stock exchange watchdog, but also by the markets. So it's important, if you think about the impact or the exclusion in a certain way, it's really important. I think it's important for us to act in both areas. I read an article recently that said there are two types of investors. There were the deontologists and the consequentialists. So I thought that was quite relevant, because the deontologists are the ones that say, I only want to invest in things that are already clean, according to my opinion. So it's an idea of a rationale of exclusion. And the others say, well, I want to have an impact. So that's the consequentialist. So it means investing, and perhaps even investing. These could be like climate activists, in addition to shareholder activism. So without putting Euronext in the middle of this debate too intensely, I would say the index products, okay, first, several things. You have issuers. We have a very in-depth dialogue based on their own reporting and their own commitments, and that goes through support headed upstream on their reporting strategies and generally when they get to be listed. And then we have companies that are, say, maturing their structure, generally speaking, looking at their governance. Sometimes you have recent companies, and they grow either based on the family or private equity investors, meaning they've already been exposed to a certain opening. So that's the first phase, which is support or accompaniment there ahead of time. And then we have downstream or later accompaniment or support with consulting that we've developed in ESG, and that's just happened pretty much naturally. So the products and the experience of the CAC 40, I think is very impactful here. It's a product, and it's a general public brand, I would say, CAC 40. And so businesses, companies were very sensitive to the first, second, third editions, because we've already had 3 rebalancings in every quarter. The share prices are readjusted. But how do we try to be, hopefully we're getting there, but how do we try to have a clear governance? You have GOIS, and they have a lot of experience, a lot of coverage, many companies in terms of assessing, rating, controversial watch. And what we've seen is that companies got organized and are getting organized to react and improve. So they do that in 2 ways. There's a whole space that's not completed yet. But there's a phase that I think is going to progress a lot, and that's communication, not the marketing communication, right? But it's expliciting one's commitments, a lot of ESG criteria based on charters and publication. So you have to draft those properly, and you have to meet those commitments. So all of this transparency and expliciting work or publication requires a lot of initiative. And between the first publication and the September's rebalancing, which is quite substantial, because it was more significant than the others, it's really taking into account the company's strategy, aligning ESG departments with the finance functions. That is really important, because it's not that it wasn't serious before, but what it does is it really aligns one's rationale and communication and company structuring, and it irrigates the entire company. It's a new standard, pulling the company up to a new standard. So this aspect, based on an index, so we could see as being deontological or ethics, it has an impact. It has huge impact, because what it did, it sort of shook up a company strategically. And we saw a lot of progress, especially including in the companies who were already in the CAC 40 EG, and so they continued to progress, and some, in fact, progressed faster. Now, before we move into regulation, how would you characterize your relations with mainstream finances as an alternative platform, as it were? Do I get a shorter amount of time because you cut me off? The other 2 got to talk a lot longer. This is quite annoying. Well, I think we're completely different from classic, typical financing. We want to help them. We want to have an impact, but we're not dogmatic. So what do we do, especially with Rift? And this is what we're talking about here. But the subject is really on the real impact and how we can quantify that. So for this, what we did was we worked on goals in terms of shareholder commitments, and with the 2I, we're working with them, trying to understand all the positions, all the voting policies amongst asset managers and their cells and all of that. But we want to be able to see if a given asset manager in various banks are in the transition objective, or if they're neutral or passive, or if they're orientating their financing and they're investing in the wrong way. So with this clearer, more realistic, more actual, real view, because this morning we heard about lots of movements with activists who, with opposing stances, and it all gets confusing. You can't really see what's going on. So with the shareholder commitment, you need to really see what's going on, and then you need to raise awareness for them. We need to sensitize them. We're doing that with classic finance. We need to give them the tools. That's why with Rift, we realized that with our database, we'll try to develop our own community infinitely. We hope one day to have 10 million people like Nuka, which uses Rift, but they're less interested in financing than investing than they are in food. So, but it's the kind of thing that's going on. So we can also go in the finance stores, quote unquote, but those are banks and financial institutions. So we're trying to install our tools across various banks, be it our questionnaires, to be sure that when you ask questions, do you want to be in green investment? Are you interested in inclusion criteria? Do you want your investments to be in line with equality issues? We want it to be that you're actually investing in something that really meets those criteria. So we're trying to get that included in banks, and we're trying to be, as it were, a bit of a plug and normalize the evaluation of everything that's regarding outside financing with diversity criteria, with everything that's happening with new accounting practices with carbon, biodiversity, and so on and so forth. We just don't really know what's going to happen. So, but we're just not serene about the fact that that will be the European vision that will take precedence in terms of accounting. What really scares us is we know that there's going to be regulation, and we want to standardize it, and we want to we want to make sure that things are in line. We just want to make sure that this is as well known and is clearly out there, and so we can actually see assessments of carbon. So transition. Now we do have to talk about regulations and rules. So there's a challenge. We have 5 minutes. You get 5 minutes each for European regulations. Okay, I think if I only have 5 minutes, I'm going to try and use my time wisely and not give you the whole like taxes, SFDR, and all of that. Well, anything and everything that's specifically related to responsible investment. Okay. I think what's interesting, it's personal, my own point of view, but over the past 2-3 years that we've been working on sustainable development and the regulatory setting in Europe, I think that what's interesting is what's coming out and the relevance and the efficiency, but as regards citizens, because we adopted the disclosure regulations with a lot of excitement, and so we had the pilot program in the Netherlands and Poland. The results were quite negative. So the thing is, we realized that most of the retail investors had a hard time understanding all of the regulatory nuances in sustainability. So these were tests that were carried out. They're pilot programs, and the results weren't. The results were lackluster. So we have to think about, can transparency, is that not the best tool to inform citizens? What expectations? What are the needs of private individuals who want to invest and responsibly, and they don't have a lot of time to spend trying to figure all that out. So the second point is, we started with the looking at the European regulations and considering that the use of labels would become less relevant, because if you had the perfect framework of regulation, that would be okay. But then we realized that well-defined labels with the investment policy and the sectorial exposure could be a tool to simplify dialogue with citizens, with the retail investors. So what we said was perhaps there was less of a role there, but in terms of labels, but that was likely to change but remain relevant in the whole equation. So I think that the third point then is the lessons that we can draw, unfortunately, from the work that was done on the European label, the famous European Eco label. I think that if we step back a bit, the work that was done, the work that we're seeing is for finance as regards citizens who want to invest responsibly, sustainably. I might be characterizing this, but caricaturizing this, but it could be perfect if you want to be green and it's ultra ambitious, but we realize that nobody is capable of defining those technical specs. They're good intentions, but maybe not having a lot of products with that very strict technical specs.
And it's unfortunate, but it goes to show that one should never forget, system-wide, that finance invests in the economy as such, as it is. And, scientists tell us that the economy is not as sustainable as we want it to be, and it's not aligned with the Paris Accord goals. So, sure, on the large scale, there will always be products that are better than others, but this is a challenge that remains. Finance can do things, but it cannot do everything. Finance invests in the economy as it is, but it also is a factor for change. It can drive change. No, I agree. I was just talking about the eco-label and the difficulty of implementing it, basically, and using it. Well, we are almost reaching the end of this session. Do we have questions in the room? If not, I will ask our panelists to tell us what they expect from the EU presidency, which will kick in next January, on these topics. So, do we have questions from the room? We have to wrap things up. We still have 30 minutes? I thought we just had 10 minutes to go. Oh, so okay. Okay, so no, sorry, I was under pressure there. But okay, so no, get your questions ready. So we'll, take all the time that we need to talk about EU regulations. So who wants to add to what Victor said? Thibaut, go ahead. Okay, I'll go for it. So to talk about MiFID, I talked about My Fair Money and the questionnaire that we'll include on the platform. I think to pair the investor with the ideal investment products. I mean, we work with Finance for Tomorrow in order to create a template of sort of pairing questionnaire that financial institutions can use to comply with the MiFID regulation. And it's not easy because, the European institutions, they have to, put forward directives on this, and it's difficult for them to do that. You talked about SFDR and ensuring that there is a dialogue, if you will, between SFDR and MiFID. It's really complicated. So there is a regulatory challenge, for one thing. So we need to have regulations that are easy to implement and that put investors in good conditions to invest sustainably. Maybe I'm addressing something that is too big here for this debate, but it's the primacy of extra financial objectives compared to financial objectives, meaning that, this is still a financial products that you want yield, So if no product can match our extra financial criteria while still providing interesting yield, are we ready to forego the yield? And most of all, by basically giving the choice to investors by telling them, coming to our store, basically our bank, to make money, will they want to buy an impactful product instead? So from the regulatory standpoint, I think you need a hierarchy of values. Maybe you should, address the extra financial questions before the yield question, So this is just, I'm just kicking the hornet's nest, but I think at some point in the coming years we'll have to deal with it. Eva? Yes, there are, three things. First of all, MiFID, taxonomy, and the new extra financial standards. So I'm lost in this alphabet soup, CFRD, SFRD, but basically the idea is to standardize ESG criteria at the European level. There are three challenges there. With MiFID, first of all, MiFID 2 is not ambitious enough in terms of classification because this regulation requires banks and certain companies to classify their investment strategies that can sort of direct individual investors towards certain strategies. But there are no objectives, so they comply, on paper with Article 9, Article 8. They either have a commitment or engagement or exclusion strategy, but it's not ambitious enough. We believe we should have a wider reform of the financial sector, and financial players should really be the drivers. You shouldn't expect everything to sort of drip down from the regulatory framework, and your questionnaire goes to show this. Second of all, taxonomy. This morning, I followed the proceedings here, and there were lots of discussions regarding what is considered as being green, as not green. Poland is sticking up for its coal production. France is sticking up for its nuclear energy system. So the taxonomy, you know, the categories basically of what is green and what is not green is a challenge. And at least we need to agree on part of it, even if we do not agree on all the classification, you know. So, you know, financial players should, you know, be drivers in this. We already talked about this classification 5 years ago. So, you know, I hope that we will also push diversity with this classifications. Finally, the third challenge, the extra-financial standards. Here, the problem is terminology, the words, basically. We need to make sure that we will be using ESG terminology and not an impact-related terminology, which is the problem. The government, the French government, set up a so-called impact platform. What they call an impact platform is actually an ESG platform. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad. I'm saying that if we don't communicate the reality, the truth to people, it's not going to work. So we won't see this movement, this shift in savings, basically. So to give you a very concrete example, for, you know, in America, for instance, in the US, regarding governance problems, if you have a more horizontal governance, the G in the ESG will be considered as not as efficient, you know, when actually in Europe, as you know, the more horizontal you are, the higher your G is in ESG. So we don't even agree on that. So same thing on the carbon impact. Many extra financial rating agencies believe that we should rate the carbon tax in terms of its efficiency for the bottom line of the company and not its efficiency for nature, you know. So meaning that, for instance, if a company, let's say a company wants to set up, you know, a factory on a cliff, basically if they manage to make it, you know, stick on the cliff with, I don't know, piles, it means that it would work, when actually from a natural standpoint, it's crazy. Sorry, Delphine, just one word, just a question. I know that you all think the training of financial advisors is important, and Thibault said so earlier on, but for, you know, investors to wrap their hands around the market, you know, the advisors also need to know their way around the market. So just, you know, to address what you said earlier on, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the financial, you know, companies. I mean, if we're going towards a landscape that is too complex or, you know, with many constraints, they're just not going to go for it at all. And those who will have a more user-friendly framework, like the US, will move forward and we won't. So basically, companies want a clear list of criteria, and in their internal, you know, in their communications, they have to use specific words, obviously, so that everyone understands what they want to do. But and not everyone agrees on these questions, and that's life, obviously. But it is important to understand that there will be a form of convergence from the standard standpoint, and if Europe wants to be at the forefront of this, Europe has to be pragmatic and pushing the topic of impact at all costs. I think it's just not going to address the so-called elephants in the room or hidden in the closet. I don't know. Regarding MiFID, I think we should draw lessons from some of the harmful effects that we saw a few years back regarding the pairing strategies. What impact did it have in systems that are managed not industrially, but certainly in a standard way? So it's inevitable that large companies will have to simplify and create binary choices, if you will. So we have to take that into account. Also, we know that MiFID had very, you know, lofty purposes, but in the end led to a decrease in the coverage of small and average shares. So it was very virtuous, but it ended up as, at some point, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So, and once that is done, it's very difficult to go back. So, I'm thinking, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the users. How are they going to react? We know that they're going to react, but are they going to react the way we expect them to? So I wouldn't want us to have a framework that is too complex, too multidimensional, and then the players would rather go for something much simpler. So what they have chosen to do in the US or in the UK is basically to keep going with the financial incentive, and I'm going to base my whole system on from the point of view of the risk for the company. So, and that's not absurd, mind you, but basically their approach is, as a financial regulator, I address these environmental questions because if we don't, it will be harmful for companies. We are much more impact-minded. But we have to keep it somewhat simple. Yes, let's keep this simple. Well, from what you're saying, we need simplicity, but still we need a diverse offering of products that can answer the various questions that Thibault mentioned earlier on. I think we need something simple, but we need something that can adapt to the demand side. Well, we need simplicity in the approach, but we're not going to have just one product, just one business model. I hope so. I mean, so this eco-label might be counterproductive? Well, we have to understand the difference between the transition and the end game. For instance, the debate on the nuclear energy, do we believe that it's an energy of transition, or do we believe that it's the end game, And it's the same thing for everything, When you do ESG, basically, do you think it's leading you somewhere, or do you think it's the end game? So, and if we were able to set real objectives at the European and French levels, I think we would expose ourselves to less reputational risks, especially from the point of view of our public policies. Victor, do you think the eco label has been built in order to be broken down into different offerings, or will it be just this single product? As far as I know, it's a single product, but with broken down into several products depending on the regulatory sort of treatment and depending on the customers that it's being made available to, on the clients. So, but the specs again are much too ambitious to correspond to anything that exists in real life. So, just to add to what was said before by Eva, at the beginning, MiFID's ambition was to reference the EU legislation, but actually politicians decided to create complex objectives whereby a financial advisor should ask their investors how much they wanted their products to align with the EU taxonomy. So, but actually there are not that many green products out there. Currently, the European economy, for listed companies, I mean, the alignment is just 2 to 3%. 2 to 3% of the listed companies' activities aligns with the green objectives of MiFID, basically. So, so if a client says, well, I need 50% of my portfolio, and the advisor will say, well, given the products that actually exist, I'm going to have a hard time bringing you up at 10%. So I think it's going to bring about very difficult discussions. So it's a challenge, to communicate this to investors. If I may, I'd like to come back to two things. First of all, come back on two things. As Eva said, since we have a climate emergency, we need to be ambitious, and we need a methodology that is robust and precise, and which is science-based, obviously. But it also means that these are going to be complex methodologies, and in front of us, we have an audience, I would say, that is not ready to hear this complexity. So every time we talk about responsible finance for investors, we have this double problem, if you will. How do we give them the information that they need, and how do we make sure that they understand it? So it's more a question than an answer, because we are up against this problem on a daily basis in our communications efforts, and we often talk about this with the risk teams to find the proper talking points, and it's not easy. And I think labels do have a role to play. But as Pierre was saying, I mean, a label in itself cannot satisfy all the expectations of the investors who think of themselves as responsible. For instance, the Greenfin label, or certification, if you will. There will be investors who will invest into this, and the Greenfin label can probably answer the demands and expectations of those investors. But for that to happen, the financial advisors, the broker, should not push the ESR label instead. The ESR label is very large, very wide-ranging, but the products covered by it do not necessarily meet the levels of expectations of an investor. You know, if you want impact and you invest into an ESR thing, you might not have any impact. So this is why there's a lot of discussion at the moment about a restructuring of the ESR label. And I think that in that ESR label, we should discriminate between the products which are actually responsible products and which make sure that you won't be exposed to certain activities, and the others who will be impactful products. And the list of criteria that I mentioned earlier on, I think it can be useful, and the broker should tell their clients, if you really want to have an impact, you should invest in companies where 70% of the money that you invest is impactful. So to me, the sinews of war really is to simplify, but whilst remaining precise and robust. A question from the room, maybe? Nope. Yes? Could you please introduce yourself? Off mic, sorry. You'll be given a mic, madam. Thank you. Well, for any investor today, finding their way through all these labels and information, I mean, it's very complicated. I mean, we are, part of this. We're in this trade, and yet for us it's difficult as well. So I don't know how banks or regulators can address this problem. And Litam is a private company, but they bring what seems to be a simple solution to individual investors by providing quite clear and simple products to invest in. And I don't know at this point what initiative that regulators and banks are, doing or putting forward to impart simple messages on individual investors, because at this point, we are speaking about this in our circle, in our industry, and it's an ever-changing picture. So we're talking about very complex norms, lists of criteria, etc. But how can you, give a simple and transparent overview to individual investors?
Well, to have trialed this out with Rift, we realized that the transparency is what makes it simple. Pure transparency. See, on this product, it's only 20% invested directly. for in Euro funds on average. So if you look at that, we know that because we have it internally. So it's 50% of bonds and debt buyback, but we try and make some impact that way on the 20%. And people, when you tell them that, it just takes about 2 minutes. It's a pretty graph, and they'll get it. I think we don't get today with Rift is why there isn't enough transparency. It's not only about the EDS government listing with where we wanted some 70% of investment in RSI. Now there's only 30%. They say it's just not possible. Well, then just say it. If you have a sustainable savings account, a sustainable livret, you should have 30% there. You have to be able to be transparent and honest if you want to sell these products. Otherwise, people just won't be interested in the whole product range. But that's also part of the overall financial education of the general population. But I think it's fast. I mean, when I hear this livret, the investment books, in France, that we tend to assimilate. There's a real problem of financial education amongst the general population. That's why the feedback of what Delphine mentioned in the beginning is interesting. The feedback and the return of private individuals to the stock exchange, it's really a sort of experimentation of shares and movable assets. Well, there's a choice. It's complementary. They've got all of the options of investment, including life insurance. But if they go towards shares, it's because they've got maybe passive management, which gives them certain advantages in diversification capacity, packaging, product packaging, or costs. It's sort of going back to individual management, and you have to understand what you're doing and know what you're doing if you're willing to take the risk. So investors will be looking at, say, corporate questions and their actual involvement. And so people are individual, and they won't have an individual impact, right? But then you have the aggregation phenomena that can have an impact there. But today, private individuals are sort of in a stock picking rationale, and exchanging on the social networks, communicating on that, and participating substantially in the IPOs. And we're pushing a product that will allow individuals to participate in the same conditions, increasing a stake in capital. They tend to be excluded right now because they get blocked up because and then their price drops and they want to be able to participate in the milestones of a company. And if we can put these democratic pricing schemes at the same level, but since the most recent posting, you can see the opening of the whole scope here for the public. So bringing investors back to their individual experience and their education. Is it a story? Is it storytelling? Or is it somehow just getting them involved and making things simple? I think there's a question there, but I can't find it here on my tablet. Okay, what data do you use in Rift and in My Fair Money to determine that the products, financial investment products are actually green? Okay, Eva first. And then Thibault, maybe Thibault can start. We don't use them, so we don't qualify the products as being green or not green. As I was explaining, we evaluate, we assess their level of alignment with the 2-degree trajectory. So we're not tied to that taxonomy, but we can say that a product, if you put money into it, you'll be putting your money in companies that have emissions trajectory that align with our objectives. That's the maximum that we can do on our platform. And we call that a climate score, because to speak with our investors, we need simplicity, we need scores, and we can add to that, we round that out with exposure percentages. So we can say you would be exposed at the X% to coal, oil, whatever. But we don't have an indicator or a percentage saying they're like light green, dark green, medium green, 60% green, which I think is what you were saying, Eva. We're just factual. You say, okay, you're exposed at 33% to oil and gas. And that info is simple, and people get it, and it allows them to make informed choices. So in the same rationale of what Thibaut just said, the risk of saying green or not green is you're putting in a whole industry calling it green when it's not necessarily always green. So we're waiting for taxonomy to say green or not green, but we go further in terms of emissions. And here we calculate, say, carbon emissions, underlying emissions to your product. If you don't have all of those, it would be the stats based on the activity, the business line. And so we can go down, we're finely enough to give you some carbon impact assessments, and we can show you if there are potential products that emit less, right? So to improve your impression, as it were. So we say, okay, this is clear enough, and that allows you to choose products that have a biodiversity score that's higher, for instance. And if you go more towards, you lean more towards A, so then you can choose the product that would be the greenest possible. So that's the level of transparency we have to be effective in our methods, and not saying, okay, so the industry is transitioning, like the textile industry. We don't really expect that necessarily. We didn't expect that in the past to be the most emitting the most gases, but with a lot of relocation of the business line, well, then textiles completely changed in terms of emissions. So we'd rather be looking at emissions as opposed to looking at the sector or the industry itself. But you have the taxonomy vision, and you always get the indicators. So it's a sophisticated question, right? And what about like satellite imaging to identify physical and transition risks? That's not private savings, right? But I'm just wondering, though, if you have like a certain amount of data, and I think that can serve a purpose, that can serve towards identifying financial products. I'd like to answer that question. I think I would look at it more broadly than what you said. One of the TGI niches here is you have to integrate finance into the real economy, because finance is like numbers and bits of paper, but there are physical assets behind that. And that's the whole principle of the Pact methodology that we use to calculate the alignment of a financial product. So we go all the way down, we take it all the way down to, say, a coal mine or the nuclear power plant, or look at their 5-year production estimates, forecasts. Okay, if you finance these assets, are you ultimately financing an economy that is aligned with 2 degrees or not? And so I think that my answer is maybe in in the question. So it's all based on geodata in the physical assets, and ultimately, I think we'll need that type of data. But we also need physical risk exposure data to avoid the case that we had earlier. That's maybe you have a plant that's on stilts above water, and that changes the physical risk. Whereas before, today we're oriented transition, and so that type of data can round out the vision with the information on the physical risks. Okay, you have that data on Rift and the the accounting units, and you have the physical risks where you're necessarily exposed. So I think that's really good. So we see that there are limits, and we're starting to see the effects of a real global warming in Europe. So people are finally starting to get interested, but that's good, because there were lots of limits. And without being too cynical, maybe you have to wait until New York is underwater and then see some real action to get people to realize that it can impact us. Because I think if you look at all the initiatives that expose, that shed light on real risks, that can enable private individuals to develop their true vision as to how this can be addressed, I think it's really important. And I think we do live in a society of images, so we do need images, I think, to orientate individual choices. We're being very careful on having true follow-through and true surveillance of these images. So satellite images can provide objectivity to data that we're going to use. But not only regarding climate, but biodiversity as well, huh? You can imagine changes in soil quality and many other issues. Okay, now, madam, question from the lady. Thank you. Yes, I had a question on informing financial advisors. You talked a little bit about that. Could you tell us if you think that there's enough right now, the knowledge of financial advisors? And if not, how can we remedy that? Would that be regulation, or would that be the markets themselves? I could answer that. It's true. I don't know what we do some of it, but what's important is how the bank is structured, and the financial advisors. You have the sort of daily kind of financial advisors who are asked a lot, and these people advise people from 100 to 100,000 wealth managers, and you have so these are kind of the daily grind people, and so these are maybe not the most well trained in these products, because you have these very structured products, and it's normal. If I'm a bank administrator, maybe like the Crédit Coopératif, a local bank, and I can't have all that training, and the client isn't necessarily willing to pay for that type of advice. So there has to be an entire reform. I believe in BNP made that announcement. There's something really intelligent at the time. And so, well, maybe the banking business needs to reorientate to it's a business model that's really transition based, and it's good. So at least you know why you pay. You pay these fees to get proper advice. So we do train retail bank advisors. They're supposed to explain to you the best way to have get your home loan, your life insurance. So individual information is really important. You have to continue training these individual advisors, perhaps get some subsidies there. We, in fact, are advocating subsidies for all of this training, and this would be through clientele advisors. And some private banks are better informed, and we realize that they are incentivized based on products that have high emissions, so we have to switch that. Their incentives, their sales incentives have to change. They should get higher incentives if they sell more products that are aligned with RSI, sorry. So SRI, sorry. So, and then you have, in wealth management, they structure tailor-made products for you, and that's a completely different level of training, because there's more technicity in that. So this is sort of at our level, and they have to follow the bank's doctrine, and they have to carry that out. And here's where regulation could pop in and help us there. That was a bit quick there. Okay, Victor? I think that what we're seeing is, where I think regulation is good, it actually gets the discussion started across financial institutions. The fact that there's a deadline, that we have to meet the regulation, and you have to set up the processes, and financial advisors more broadly are looking at that. So it's becoming formalized, right? Right. And that's a good thing, I think. But I don't think we should have any wool over our eyes. The regulations are not going to solve everything. I'm thinking about what Delphine said earlier, the fact that on the scale-wise, the processes are automated, industrialized. It will have to, at some point, we won't be able to be doing a lot of perfect bespoke products. So I think that, yeah, someone's going to have to be paid for that. And is our customers ready, willing to pay for that? I'm not sure. And I think that you have to be realistic, though, as to what the solutions or regulations can actually bring about. Now, thank you. 1 minute. Do you all have a final message? You only get 1 minute for the audience. Thibault. Okay, in 1 minute. Okay, so is this the regulators' responsibility, or citizens, or companies? I think we won't be able to address this urgency if we don't all work together, and this holds for the finance industry as well. And in answer to all these questions, we need more awareness. We need more sustainable investment, people who know the regulations, who know what's going on, and we won't be able to solve the issue if we don't leverage all of these strengths in the same direction. So all the pragmatism here is absolutely necessary. And I think that the person who asked the question said it in the question. We often sometimes get it all wrong. And let's not forget that we're all a well-informed public here, and we know what we're doing. But if you're looking across society, across Europe, training and informing customers who are not necessarily that well-informed, it's a major challenge, or major issues. We're going to have to be very pragmatic. And we are really starting from, we're way behind. We're way behind in the game. Okay, somebody said pragmatism, yes. I think it's important also to not forget our fundamentals. And, okay, we have these good principles, these founding principles of good governance, the idea of equal treatment and so on, and justice. But I'm just hoping that the markets and the listed companies have enough credibility, because they've always respected a certain amount of rules and regulations. So I think it's important to say that fundamentally we trade equally across private individuals and institutionalists. We know that there are rules of the game, and that they have to follow those rules online, offline. We have to all comply and make sure that we're on sound footing. I've already spoken a lot. It's good to be interested in all this, but you have 10 people, 1 out of 10 people maybe are really interested in this. We do have to make it as a topic that interests the masses, like food, like textiles. I think then we can go further with the indicators and more transparency and regulations, and the rules and regulations and institutions are not going to be able to establish everything. But you have to the general public has to take ownership of these tools, and everything has to be transparent. So talk about it to 10 people, because 1 out of every 10 people, you need to talk to 10 people so that everyone else becomes more aware, and have everyone download Rift. But thank you very much for listening.